Hi everyone, it's Carissa, and today I have with me Michelle Goldblum. And I know Michelle because she is one of the co-founders of Soul Camp, and she has a really inspiring story, as you're going to hear. Michelle is somebody who found a lot of traditional success early in her career, and likely could have stayed that course, but made the more complicated choice to live a more authentic path. And in doing so, her and Ali have created this amazing thing in Soul Camp. And is Soul Camp is something that is changing lives. It's really become, I think she would agree, bigger than her, bigger than Ali. It's really becoming a movement, and it's bringing a lot of beauty and love and fun into the world. And so I'm so grateful that you chose this new journey, because it's forever changed mine. And I know people are going to take a lot of inspiration from your story. So thank you.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
This is awesome. So why don't you start off with tell us where you're at and what are you up to?
Great. So right now I am, like what you said, I'm the co-founder of Soul Camp. So Soul Camp is an adult sleepaway camp for the soul. So we have 4-day, 4-night, overnight camps in New York and California. And we're having day camps around the country this year. We have digital programs. We're going to be launching exciting new coaching programs in the future. So really creating a whole company around the creation and spreading of fun and joy, and really tapping into the child within, and not just nurturing that child, but like letting that child out to play. So Soul Camp is now my full-time job, which is wonderful and amazing. And part of Soul Camp also is Soul Camp Creative, which is branding, website design, marketing for those in the mind, body, spirit, personal development, transformational space. So in a nutshell, that's what I'm up to.
You describe Soul Camp so well. When people ask me about it, I always kind of default to it's a wellness retreat, because I feel like that's what people can get their head around. But I'm like, I'm understating it. Like, it's so much more than that. Like, there's tie-dye and a dance party, and it's so much fun. But say it. You explain it way better than that. I'm going to have to write that down. So take us back, because you weren't always on this path. So take us back to your graduating college, and you choose advertising. So how did that come about? Why'd you choose advertising?
Yeah, so I was a psych major at George Washington University in DC, and all I really knew was that I wanted to live in New York City. I wanted to live in New York City. I wanted to make a lot of money, because eventually I wanted to become a psychologist and help people. That was like the plan. But I didn't want to go right to school. I wanted to have like a New York City experience. So I asked around, like, what would I be good at? And, my professors and whoever were like, well, you're very personable, and, you're a real people person. Like, you would be great in sales or advertising. So I looked up the 10 best advertising firms in New York City, and sent my resume out to all of them. And I had had some, sales promotional internships in the past, but I sent my resume out to all of them. Ogilvy and Mather was one that wrote back pretty quickly. And I started my career with Ogilvy, and I knew nothing. So all I knew was like, I'm in advertising. But the sect of advertising that I got involved in right out of college was pharmaceutical marketing. So medical education, pharmaceutical marketing and branding. So I didn't realize how like secular and small that like area was, because it was just all I knew. But I got involved, right after college, and started at Ogilvy, moved my way up pretty quickly, then went over to Klein Davis and Mann, and had clients Novo Nordisk in Copenhagen. So I was traveling around the world doing brand development for insulin. So it was like we were in stage 3 clinical trials, and we were the next generation insulin. And so doing focus groups around the world, really being like, what do you think and feel about this insulin? Like, when you see the color red, what comes to mind? So like doing branding work and really messaging, positioning, how is this differentiated for insulins, and then for cardiovascular medications. And then later on in my career, I was working at Gray, doing branding and strategy for Johnson & Johnson, their psychiatric line. So I was working for schizophrenia and for bipolar 1, like traveling around the country, interviewing patients before and after stories. So really, really interesting work, and not and knowing always that this wasn't it. Like, right when I first graduated college, it was, okay, this is it until I become a psychotherapist.
Yeah.
This is it until I go back to school. But then, 8 years later, it was like, okay, I'm not going to go back to school, but like, this isn't it. And so right around the same time, I don't know if you want me to like go into this whole thing.
Well, tell me, so when you say you knew it wasn't right, what did that feel like?
Well, I wasn't yet involved in like the mind, body, spirit, spirituality, wellness space. So I didn't like have a name for it at that point, but like I just knew like I couldn't see myself just doing this for the rest of my life. Like I looked at like my superiors, right, in this space and what their life was like, and it wasn't like I didn't want that, right? I didn't want what she had. So it was so that kind of like was the guide in a way of like, okay, well, if I keep in this career, this is what life will look like.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I don't know what I want, but like I don't want that long term. But I'm still in my 20s, so like I don't need to worry about that yet.
Yeah.
And then after that, I was like, yeah. As I was inching closer and closer to like 30, and that's kind of when everything started to unravel back together.
Well, yeah. So tell it what kicks off the unraveling, and what does the unraveling look like?
Yeah. So what kicks off the unraveling? So I was living with my boyfriend at the time. We were together 3 years, and he was 11 years my senior, and had kids from his previous marriage that we had every other weekend. So my life was very like I was living this whole life. The girls are amazing. I loved his children. But I had this life where I was like every other weekend at the soccer games and like rising high in the pharmaceutical marketing and advertising world, and then going out with him hard, like on the days that we didn't have the kids, and like living like all of these different like lives in a way. And so the unraveling started when him and I decided to take a break. So because I wasn't so in love with my career, it wasn't my identity. He was my identity, right? Like, so like being his girlfriend, being his soon-to-be fiance, being a soon-to-be stepmother for the girls, that was who I was. So when he moved out and we decided to take a break for 2 months, that was the beginning of the unraveling. So we decided to take a break. We were going to get back together in 2 months. We had a vacation planned with the girls, and it was like a 2-month timeout almost. And he, the weekend that he was moving out, June 17th, 2011, my friend was like, why don't you not be here in the city? Like when the U-Haul van is coming, like let's get out of the city. There's this woman who like talks about her inner child and talks about the universe, and like, you might like that. Like it's at this place called Omega, and which is like this huge mind, body, spirit, holistic retreat center in Rhinebeck, New York. And I was like, okay, let's go. So I went for this weekend, and I showed up, and that teacher ended up being Patricia Moreno, and who's like in such a full circle, moment, kicks off all of the soul camps and is like one of my dearest friends now. And I arrived, and she never lets me forget it. I arrived in this room full of 30 other women, hysterically crying. Literally, like, we all went around and was like, why are you here? And people were like, to discover my passion, or like to tap into who I really am, or connect to the universe. And I was hysterically crying. I was like, I have no idea who I am. Wow. He's like looking at the clock, like the U-Haul van is here. Like, it was like, I didn't see beyond that.
Yes.
And then within a day, I mean, it happened so quickly. And I think it was just time. Within a day, and I think it was being in this community of people who are just like me. I came from my mother is very, very spiritual and led like drumming groups and goddess groups. Mm-hmm. My only like seeing of this spiritual community were women in their 50s and 60s, like naked goddesses in a pool. Like, it was not like people like me who wanted to live in Manhattan, who wanted to, have a great life, and wanted to be very connected to the universe, wanted to be very connected to themselves. Yeah. So being around all of these women, it just so quickly activated me. And within like a day, I was like, oh my God, like I'm supposed to live this life like with people like this. And like everyone in that community is like living their dream. And like, how do you like become your dream? And I never even knew an entrepreneur. Like, I came from a family, everyone's doctors or lawyers or psychotherapists. And, like, there was never, like, I'm a businessman or it was never like, I thought, to be honest, and it's embarrassing now, but, like, I thought the word entrepreneur was almost like a descriptor word for a rich white man. Like, that's literally what I thought. And so, like, when someone was like, oh, he's an entrepreneur, I never thought that was actually, like, I thought that was almost like an adjective.
And certainly you weren't going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, how crazy. So anyway, I went to this thing, I came back, I made the declaration, I'm going to make my life omega. Like, I very clearly stated that. So I started eating, I started going to Whole Foods for the first time. I stopped smoking cigarettes that I was smoking every single day. I went off of Adderall. Like, all of these steps I started taking. And the biggest step being I immersed myself in the Intensati community. I went every single day. I went to every event. It was like, I started adopting a new identity.
So tell people what because there's another one that I know I failed to describe because I end up telling people Intensati is amazing, and I tell people about it, and usually they look back and they're like, "So it's like kickboxing?" And I'm like, "No, it's so much more than that." So, but tell me what Intensati is, and I'll put a link below for people that want to learn about it. But what's Intensati?
So what it is, it's basically a mind, body, spirit exercise class. So it's a lot of cardio, a lot of dance, a lot of kickboxing, but as you're doing that, you're yelling affirmations and really changing your inner dialogue. So there are scientific studies that show that when you say a word and make a movement at the same time, it stays in your mind longer. So it's all based on scientific background, but you're yelling instead of like punch. Like, you're yelling, like, I am strong now. Like, you're yelling these phrases that end up sticking into your mind. Yeah. And so your inner dialogue really starts to change. It's really amazing because the class is so fun and you tap in and you feel so good about yourself and you feel so connected. Yeah. But then the magic is really after the class. Like, when you're walking around and you find yourself, instead of, like, going over your to-do list in your mind, you're saying things like, I am a creative genius. Like, I am amazing. And so, like, and what you think about, you bring about, right? So, like, when you change your words, you change your life. And so that's, like, a real facet of Intensati. So you can imagine I went from being like, why am I alone? Like, who am I now? To being like, I am amazing. Yes. That was, like, a huge, huge, huge shift. Yeah. And I really started to step into, like, who I am, who I was becoming. And so by being in this wellness community, I started, like, putting my hand in, like, meditation groups. I was like, oh my God, like a kid in a candy store for the first time. Like, there's this whole world that I can start accessing. Yeah. So more and more and more, I was going to Intensati. I found oneness meditation with Margaret Nichols, who's another one of our Soul Camp instructors now. All of my teachers have become instructors, which is wonderful. And I just got very, very involved. And then the time came, it was probably like... Can I pause you for 1 second?
So when you go back, so you leave Omega, because I feel like this is where people get stuck. You leave Omega and you're like, okay, that's my world. Those are my tribe. I feel good in that space. I feel like that's me. But I feel like a lot of times, because at that point, you don't know about Soul Camp, right? You don't know about Soul Camp. You don't even know about Soul Camp Creative. Like, that's not in your world. So I think a lot of times people they're super uncomfortable. They see kind of like, they get like little bits of what feels authentic or, little glimpses of what that path looks like. But because they don't know, like, the destination, they just get paralyzed. Like, they don't know what first step to take because they don't know where they're going. And I felt that way for a long time. I was like, I don't know where I want to go. It's just not here. And so I just stayed here because I didn't know where to go. So your powerful step was what? Just to immerse yourself in things that felt authentic. You just were saying yes to stuff.
I immersed myself in things that felt authentic. And yeah, you're right. At that point, it was still 2011. Yeah. And I was, like, working at Klein Davis and Mann. My clients were Novo Nordisk. And I think maybe I started thinking, like, maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this. And then I forget exactly how it happened, but somehow, maybe it was a hedge hunter, something found me and was like, Gray is looking for head of strategy for their psychiatric Johnson & Johnson drugs. And I was like, oh my God, it's a sign. What, this is amazing. And I remember I stood up in an intensati class and I was like, I am living my dream. Like, I am now going to be doing strategy for schizophrenia. Like, it was really like, this is it.
Yeah,
like, that's how it felt at the time. And I quit my job, Klein Davidson Mann. I went to Gray. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in Union Square now, right near Intensati. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes.
And, like, I remember I wrote a whole newsletter for Patricia, and I was like, the power of Intensati, I'm now at Gray. And, like, that at that time was, like, huge. That, like, I was at Klein Davidson Mann for a while, and the fact that I, like, left and went to another agency, one, like, downtown, and one, like, that I was doing more psychiatric stuff, even though it was like not, it was really the same thing. But that was like the first huge step.
Yeah.
And like, I just followed the green light. Like, that was a green light, right? So I went there. And it's amazing how things happened, because I went to Gray and it was like it was the first time I had ever worked with people my own age. I was lucky enough to always be on pre-launch drugs, so that I was working with like the head of creative, the head of this, and I was always the youngest in the room. And now all of a sudden it was like everyone was in their 20s, and it was like I felt like almost like the girl from Mean Girls, who from Africa, like who like just like is plopped in and is like doesn't know how to even interact with people.
Right.
And it was so catty, and it was almost like over the top catty, and like everyone would talk about everyone, and like it was just like almost like it's just like a hyperbole, right? Yeah. And I was, again, as this is happening, I'm so in Intensati and so in this world. And I started looking at going to Gray, because I didn't think like, oh, this was the wrong decision. Like, it wasn't. Yeah. But I was like, okay, maybe my purpose here is to like be the happy in the room. Like, I used to always say like, I'm going to be the Buddha in the conference room. Like, I would get off of the subway and walk to Gray and be like listen to chanting music and, whatever we had listened to in Intensati, and repeat to myself, like, I am here of service. I am here right now to be the love, to be like the goodness in every room. And so for the next 6 months, I was like, I am here of service. Like, I really, really felt that, like, that was my task. And
that's
so
powerful, because a lot of people, they're in a bad situation, but they can't exit for one reason or another. And to be able to say, I'm not in a good space, I want to be over there, but you also pull some things from over there and bring it back into your life so that you can do whatever you need to do for the next 6-12 months to launch yourself. I love that idea that you're the Buddha in the conference room. I love that. I can totally see it.
Conference room. Yeah, and I would say to myself, like, okay, I have to act like I'm going into a soup kitchen right now. Like, this job is a soup kitchen. This is my service to the world, right? Like, being in this huge advertising and like being the one like doing diksha on people's heads, like giving energy work. It was like, a joke, but again, at that point, never in a million years was it like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I started doing work for Patricia just out of like the love of my heart, and I was this big advertising person. So she was like, "Oh my God, can you help me? Get the word." So I started doing pro bono work. I loved it so much, and that is when I was like, "Oh my God!" Like, because I found myself like in my office, like writing her newsletters and thinking to myself, like, "Wow, like imagine if like this was just like my job."
Yeah.
And so I was like, could you hire me? And she was like, oh no, I can't pay you. Like, no. So I was like, all right, well, I wonder if there's like another way that I could like do this type of thing. So that is when like the biggest thing I've ever done, not the biggest thing, but a big thing that I did at the time, the biggest thing at the time then was I sent out this email to everyone I knew. So it was like all my new friends in the Intensati world, but also like all my friends from like Hebrew school that I found on LinkedIn, like all, like just everyone.
Yeah.
And I wrote, and I BCC'd everyone, and I wrote, hi everyone, I am leaving the world, I am leaving pharmaceuticals. I am moving into the world of wellness. This is what I can do. My resume is attached. If anyone knows anyone in the world of wellness, that's how I phrased it, like, please pass my resume along or make an introduction. Like, I am declaring that this next stage. And I got like a million email responses of like, oh, well, I know someone at Saatchi & Saatchi, which was yet another advertising firm. Yeah. Like, I know someone at Saatchi & Saatchi, like they do wellness stuff. I'll send your resume. Or, oh, my friend opened a yoga studio. You should talk to her. Oh, I know a nutritionist. You should talk to him. So on my lunch break, I would walk around Union Square, like on these phone calls. And I was always I was an account executive, right? Like a senior account supervisor. So I was like, always like, okay, we have an agenda. This is the point of the call. But I would get on these calls being like, so, like, I don't know if, like, you're interviewing me or if I'm interviewing you, but, like, let's talk. And that led to me starting to meet with people, like, because they would hear, oh, wow, like, she did this for Johnson & Johnson. Like, this amazing that she would look at my website and give me recommendations.
And you're doing this pro bono at this point, right? Because you're really just trying to build a network, put yourself out there, and kind of, like, put your toe in the water to see if it's something you love.
Yeah, everything's pro bono. I didn't even, but I remember there was it was this woman, Shannon Sodano. She was a nutritionist, and we met at Pret in Union Square during my lunch break, and I went through her website, and I was like, well, you should change this, and, like, your social media, and blah, 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 blah. And she's, like, furiously writing notes. And then I turned to her, and at the end, and I was like, would you have paid me for that?
Yeah.
And she was like, absolutely. And I was like, how much would you have paid me? And, like, she was like, I don't know, like $200. And I was like, oh, my God. It was, like, this, like, moment of,
That's
like,
the moment.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So, up until this point, when thinking of, like, getting a new job or, like, going to Saatchi & Saatchi or working for Lululemon or whatever that would be.
Yeah.
It was always I moved up very, very quickly early on in my career. And I made a lot of money, and I bought an apartment, a very, very tiny, small apartment nonetheless, but an apartment on the Upper West Side. And so in my mind, my parameter was always like, okay, well, I have to make this much money in order to pay the mortgage. So that's like that was the deciding factor. I have to make at least this. And then I had this wake up, and I remember I was like walking, because it was never even in my mind that I could do this. Yeah. I was walking to the subway, and I was like, oh my God, I could just, like, let go of the apartment. Like, it was this moment of, like, of course. Like, I could just let it go and, like, figure it out. Like, that was, like, the big moment.
Yeah.
And so Margaret Nichols, who was my oneness teacher, also was a real estate agent. And so, of course, and the apartment sold very, very quickly, and I took it at a loss. Like, I did not make money on it. I took it at a loss. Yeah. But I had this tiny amount of money that, but big at the time, but it's an amount of money that could last me to not worry about paying rent somewhere for, like, 6 months. So I was like, okay, I have 6 months to, like, figure it out. And then if I don't figure it out, I could just go back to gray. Yeah. Like, I could just go back to one of these things. So I started, like, piecing together of, like, oh my gosh, okay, and once I made that decision that of, like, this is what I'm doing, that's when magic really started happening, because that's when I met this girl, Audrey, in, like, in a oneness meditation class, who was a designer, and she, like, owned her own business, and we decided, like, let's do something together. And then it was like, okay, like, do we have a company? What is this? So I started to put all of this together again while I was still at Gray, putting all of this together. Ooh, sorry. Hold on. Oh my gosh. I don't even know how to. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Okay. That's that. Oh my God. Okay. Sorry. That has never happened.
Wait, so before you meet Audrey, though, so you getting rid of your apartment, I feel like for a lot of people, like, you get the job and then you build a life around that income, right? You want to live as big as you can, so you live up into that income. And then the idea of shifting that income, either making less money or taking a break, or just the fear of taking a different job with less stability, becomes like your stuff owns you, right? Like, you've built this life, and now that life requires a lot of you to maintain it. So it's so bold, because I think a lot of people want to shift in their job, but they don't want to shift anything else. You know, they don't want to make any other sacrifice in their life, or they don't want to, and that's not to say you have to live in a studio apartment with just a mattress, right? I mean, you can still live abundantly, but people don't want to change their expectations of their world and of their life, or they don't want to change the scenery, but they need to do that. It's super empowering when you let that go, because now like the mortgage is not deciding for you, right? You're deciding.
When I said, like, it was never even in my, like, periphery that, like, I could just walk away. It was like, it never even was like a concept. It was like, so like, no, that is like something that's not changeable. That's like an unshakable thing. So once I had that realization, that's when everything really like changed. Mm-hmm. And like, that's when I met Audrey. We're like, okay, like, let's do a business. I contacted Margaret. I put my apartment on for sale. All this is happening. I'm still at Gray. And then the apartment sells quickly. And I'm like, holy fuck.
It's really
shit.
Happening.
This is it. So the apartment sold. I went into, and as we're like in contract negotiation, like as it's like the end, like still going back and forth, I went into my boss, and I was like, I have something to tell you. And she was like, where are you going? And I was like, I'm not going somewhere else. I'm leaving. I'm starting my own branding agency for life coaches. And I will never forget. She looked at me with this look of concern and was like, Michelle, what's going on? Like, what's going on in your life? Like, what's happening? And it was like, I realized, like, oh, she thinks I'm crazy. Like, she thinks that I'm losing it. And I was so in the intensity world, and everything was happening so quickly that, like, I was unshakable in, like, my faith of, like, this is what I'm doing. But, like, now looking back, of, like, of course, to her, I sounded so crazy. But I gave my notice, and then all of a sudden, then I had a period of time of, like, dealing with finding a new apartment and, like, all of this stuff. But then moved into, like, okay, now I'm creating this new thing, and, like, this is everything that I can do. I know how to brand. I know how to do messaging. I know how to do positioning. Can that apply to the yoga teacher? Can that apply to insulin? Could that apply to, the author? And the answer was yes. And so I'm so grateful that I had this background working at, like, Ogilvy, Gray, with, like, Pfizer, and these, like, names, because that all just added legitimacy to, like, what I wanted, like, going forward, and really anything, right? So, like, anyone who's working in corporate, like, with this, when you move more into doing your own thing, it just gives you legitimacy. Like, I really believe that. So anyway, so I started working with life coaches and branding, and then, crazy shit happens, and, like, I met Gabby Bernstein, like, at a coffee shop, and then she became a client, and, like, it was just like, boop, 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 boop. It was just like crazy magic stuff was happening, and so
did it feel like it was happening right away, or do you, like, early on, do you feel a little bit of like, what did I do? This isn't happening. Did it pick up trajectory, like, right away?
Wait, say that one more time.
Like, so your first day without a job, you've just left Gray. Is there a moment of, like, what did I do? And did it start picking up really quickly?
No, it didn't start picking up quickly.
Okay.
It started picking up very slowly. And, like, back then, like, I remember we did a website which was our first website we ever did was for another Intensati instructor, who's a Soul Camp instructor now. Anyway, and it was like, we did this whole website for her for like $1,000. And I was like, oh my God, $1,000. Now, flash forward, we, do website and branding packages for $12,000. Right. But back then it was like, oh my God, like $1,000.
We made it.
It was like mind blowing. But it picked up slowly. But I was ready for that. Like, I was ready for a slow build. Like, I was ready in terms of like 6 months, right? Of like, okay, it will take, but then starting 6 months, I started making enough to pay the rent. Yeah. And then I wasn't living like how I lived with Kevin. Like, Kevin, we went to Lincoln Center all the time, and it was like these, like, a much different life. But I was Intensati. Like, I'm telling you, Intensati, like, really is the guiding force here, and Patricia knows it. And it's because it became everything. It became how I survived. And then, and then after year one, Audrey left the company, and that was another moment of like, shit, like, now what? I'll never forget. I was like with Ali, because I had met Ali by this time. I was with Ali and my friend Nitika, and we were in a room, and it was like New Year's Eve, and I was crying, and I was like, Audrey just told me she doesn't want to move forward. Like, what do I do? Like, do I end the company? And they were all like, Michelle, no one even knows Audrey. Like, you have been the face of I Am Creative. Like, go forward. And again, that was like, I couldn't imagine like just doing it, but I did. And so that was back in 2012, the end of 2012. Mm-hmm. So 2012, 2013, I'm Creative started blowing up. And that was me going to every single thing. So the beginning of I'm Creative, I volunteered at every book launch. I was like, did setup for like Mama Glow, Latham Thomas's, like, I was just to meet people, just to like get in the wellness world. And so I was just volunteering for events, just being of service. And when people would ask, what do you do? Then I would be like, oh, well, and this is my background.
I love that. It's so easy to look at you now and think, well, this just happened. Like, no, there's a lot of hustle involved in creating this. Yeah.
A lot of hustle, a lot of like, but at the end of the mantra that I always had was like, I'm not someone who will end up on the street. Like, I kept just saying that. Like, I'm not someone who will end up on the street. I'm really smart. Like, I will figure out something. And, like, if this doesn't work, I was also, like, not, like, stronghold to, like, this, it needs to look like this. It was kind of like, I was just so happy to, like, have a laptop in Starbucks. Like, that was, like, mind-blowing to me that I was one of those people. Yeah. Like, because I remember I would always, like, get Starbucks on the way to work and be like, who the fuck are these people? Like, what are they doing? What is everyone doing in here? And all of a sudden I was there. And I was just like, it was so simple, the beginning of like, just like the joy of not going into an office every day, the joy of like choosing the hours. It was just like I was so excited.
And make it yours. It's yours. It's truly yours.
It's mine. Yeah. And then really it's just one foot ahead of the other, you know, by nature of like being in all of these, volunteering at all of these events. I was at my friend Jess Ortner's like book launch party. I met Rochelle, who's now one of my best friends, who's the head of global publicity for Hay House, which is a big publishing company. And so Rochelle just started sending me all of their authors. And that's when I Am Creative really was like, okay, now we're working with Marianne Williamson. It was just like, boop, 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 boop. And so it was around that time that I met Ali. And so me and Ali, when we started Soul Camp, again, this is not like, this is our business, Soul Camp. It was just like, oh my gosh, because Ali owned a branding agency, I owned a branding agency. And our camp director from when we were 9 years old contacted us on Facebook and was like, hey, like, I see that you guys always go to these different like retreats and yoga events. You know, if you ever want to come back to your home, Camp Tawanda, you can have a yoga retreat here. And we were like,
because you and Ali had gone to camp together as kids.
We went to, the crazy thing is we went to camp together as kids, but didn't know each other there. Okay. We went to the same camp. We were there at the same time. She knew me. I'm 2 years older than her. Okay. So she knew me, you know, the older girls. But I didn't know her because she was like a child. Like she was in lower camp. So she knew me, but we never spoke. And then 15 years later, again, all comes back to Intensati. She spotted me in an Intensati flash mob photo on Facebook and reached out, and we became friends. And it's just so funny looking back because she reached out and I saw, and it was when I first started I Am Creative with Audrey. And I looked at what she did, and I went to her website, and I remember I called my mom crying, and I was like, someone's already doing it! Like, it was like this feeling of, like, she's doing it already. Like, talk about lack and fear. It was just like, you know, but, I mean,
there's that feeling that, like, that there's only enough to go around. Like, I do the same thing. Like, I look at people who are doing what I want to do, and there's a feeling of there's only so much to go around, and it turns out there's an abundance, like that we can all kind of play together. Yeah.
Abundance. And it's just amazing because once, I mean, I had to let go of that fear and like, you know, lack with regards to Ali because otherwise she would never become my best friend. Yeah. So we became best friends, and then our camp director reached out And again, we were both doing branding, and he was like, why don't you have a retreat here? And we're like, oh my God, what if we put on a whole camp? Because all of our clients and friends are these people who have these audiences. Like, what if we just like brought everyone together? And it's so funny because our first website was soulcamp2014.com, because that's how small we were thinking. It was just like, oh, this is a one-time event. It was never like, this is our business. Like, no business plan, no LLC. It was like, we're putting on an event. And it wasn't until we saw what happened at camp, like when we were driving around in the golf cart and like looking around and being like, oh my God, that's when we were like, oh wait, this is actually bigger than that.
You're seeing like the transformations. You're seeing people really come alive. Yeah. Wow.
So that was like amazing, and that was amazing, and really just realizing like, wow, like this is something bigger. But it was never like with Soul Camp. It was never like, wow, this is something bigger. Let us both quit our branding jobs and do this. And it was like, no. This is something bigger. Like, let's see what it is. Yeah. And we worked with Soul Camp. I mean, talk about hustle. Like, Ali owned her branding agency and was a body confidence coach. I owned my branding agency and had like 20 clients going on simultaneously. And we were creating Soul Camp and not making any money from Soul Camp. And we didn't make any money from Soul Camp. I mean, we still aren't really making that much money from Soul Camp, but we weren't able to take any money, like no salary or anything, until this year. Until this year is the first year.
So it was just a passion project. It just felt right, and you're like, I don't know why, but I have to stay the course.
Yeah, and we really believed in it. Like, we really believed that, like, we believed in it, of course, as a mission. Like, without immediately we did. But we believed in it as a business, but we were in it for the long haul. We had a friend, a very successful friend, say once, like, if you knew that you were going to make no money for the next 5 years, nothing, you're not going to take home a dime, but then in 10 years, you are going to be making amazing money, feel so abundant, and you're going to have the life of your dreams, would you be in it? Would you stay? Yeah. And without question, it was like, yes. So that's so this year, we each stepped away from I Am Creative, stepped away from Ali's brand. Like, we're full-time in Soul Camp now. And it's just been like the most amazing journey and like, when I think back to like, wow, it was only five years ago, soon to be 6 years ago, that I was like a cigarette smoking, Adderall taking, like pharmaceutical exec that like would drink myself to blackout. And like, that was my life. Is like, it's just so amazing how quickly things can change when you really just like don't put that was like the biggest thing I was able to create with such joy. Like, I never put myself in a really stressful situation. So I didn't leave my job until I sold an apartment and had a nest egg for 6 months. Yeah. But I was able to create in those 6 months without fear. I had joy. Because I knew, okay, 6 months, and if it doesn't work, I'm going back to corporate. It was never like, this must work. Like, this is it. This is my only chance. Like, it wasn't that at all. And even with Soul Camp, it was like, all right, well, we're not quitting our other jobs until we can.
It's totally that shift from, like, fear to love, because that was my big, like, Soul Camp experience, was, like, I look back at everything before that, and I was like, wow, I was really operating from a place of fear. Like, I just made decisions about what would look right to the outside world or what would keep me safe. I was just guided by fear. And then it really is amazing, because when you line yourself up with love, like, you literally just come into a space not thinking about, you're not even thinking 20 years forward. You're just thinking, how can I be of service right now? How can I put more love into the space right now? And then everything just lines up so beautifully. But you can't explain it. And it's like, it's a scary step for someone who's been operating out of fear, because that's all they've ever known. So like, to make that shift it's a real leap of faith, but it's there for you. Like, once you take it, everything just starts, for me, everything started showing up. So yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah. And especially people in corporate, like, how lucky are you that you're in corporate right now? Because you could always go back to corporate. Right. Like, if you choose to be, like, it's the person who never had like a solid corporate career and like is starting from nothing and doesn't really have anything. Like, if worse comes to worse and everything goes to shit, you have skills and you can apply to something else, right? You have a work history. So like, how amazing. Like, thank God. Like, that's such what a relief. I mean, that's how I felt.
Yeah.
Like, all right, like if all of this doesn't work, and still, I mean, I don't really think this, but when I get into fear now, like, which can happen still, because again, like, still an entrepreneur, fear is like part of it, like part of like the game, like that's what you sign up for. When I go into fear, I calm myself down by just reminding myself, like, all right, well, worst case scenario, I could go back to like Ogilvy and like I'd be a freaking rock star because I created all these companies. Like, I could like do whatever I want there. And then I'm like, okay, right. Like, there are options. Yeah. I'm not, and seriously, my mantra is like, I'm not going to end up on the street. Like, I won't. So, and that calms me down.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So beginning of the story, kind of you said that you felt like your identity was really wrapped up in your relationship, right? And then you break that off and you go to gray and kind of like telling Intensati, I've arrived, like I'm living my dream. So kind of gray in that new role becomes your identity. That's who you are, right? So what's your identity now that you're on the other side of this?
My identity now is ever changing. Right now, it really, it's so interesting. Like, so when I was working in I Am Creative was like, I would like introduce myself as like, hi, I'm creative. Like it was like I was so attached to that, to like, I am this. And that wasn't healthy either. So I'm trying to find a balance, especially I'm getting married this, next year. Yeah. And we're talking about, getting pregnant soon. And like, just, I'm starting to like really see that like my identity can be spread throughout so many different things, from wife to mom to founder of this amazing company to spreader of light wherever I go. Like, there's no like, I am this, because I don't want to pigeonhole myself, and I've done that in the past.
Yeah. And what happens is, what you experience, which is when that goes away, it's like a full identity crisis. You have to reassess everything.
Totally.
Versus when you spread it across multiple channels, if something's not going right, you still find joy and fulfillment in all these other things.
Yeah, it's so important.
Absolutely. All right, so a couple more questions. So obviously we have kind of habits that kind of chart our course, right? So you developed all these habits and then you leave the corporate world and now you're an entrepreneur. Are there habits that you had to break? Were there things that you just no longer served you that you had to kind of, create new habits for yourself?
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, the smoking and the Adderall was huge. Like that, those did not serve me anymore. Like they were no longer relevant to the person I was becoming. And same with food stuff, and same with working out stuff. Like working out, moving has been a huge part of my life now. And food, I always had a really messed up relationship with food, especially because I was on Adderall and like didn't eat at all. So it was just like, and then once I went off of Adderall, it was like finding out like, okay, like what is my body, and like what does it look like to like have a sustainable, healthy 3 meals a day? Like, what does all that look like? So that's really important too. The food stuff is very important. The working out stuff is very important. And having just people or groups where I could just like go and just like say whatever's going on in my mind, like the fear, the shame, whatever it is, like to not keep it down. That's very, very important also. And that could be Soul Camp, that could be Intensati, that could be my therapist, that could be a 12-step, whatever it is, right? Like I have a lot of different rooms I could walk into.
Having that tribe is so, so important. And I was talking to Grace and Julie at camp, and I was just talking about, when much like you, when you go and give your notice to somebody who doesn't understand it, they look at you with sheer panic.
Great.
So like when you're going through this transformation and you're looking at people who are working the 9 to 5 and are kind of staying the course, they can't appreciate it. Like they want to love you, but they don't know how to support you because this is crazy, and they don't want the bottom to fall out from under you. So like finding people who are like-minded, who can cheer you on and say there's something on the other side is just so, so critical. And that's why I felt the need to create this, because I was like, when I went to Soul Camp, I started meeting people who were going through the same thing, and they were thinking like I was thinking. And I was like, I'm not crazy. This is a thing. It just really kind of empowered me to step forward. So this is awesome.
So important, and I think that so many people now more than ever are realizing like, wait, I have everything that I like had on my checklist to have, right? And I'm not feeling full, and I'm not feeling fulfilled, and it feels like there's more, and like I don't even know what that means. And so to have like someone like me, right, like who've done it, who are just a few steps ahead, right? It's so empowering and so amazing. And so I applaud you for what you're creating.
Thanks. Well, thanks for being here. So if people want to get in touch with you, they want to learn about Soul Camp or Soul Camp Creative, where do they find you?
Yes, go to www.soul.camp, no.com, or just .camp. And all information's on there, soul.camp/creative. That's the creative agency. But soul.camp, you'll see all about our upcoming camps, and you can watch videos and all of that stuff. And if you want to reach out to me directly, I'm Michelle at soul.camp. Awesome. I'd be happy to hear from you.
I want Soul Camp for everybody. I want everyone to go to Soul Camp. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.